one I would like to welcome is French journalist Jean Lesieur, who is here to actually give a talk this evening at the Providence Committee on Foreign Relations. Monsieur Lesieur,
hi.
Thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Well, this is the studio, and you're getting prepared to give a talk this evening. Now, you've got a unique vantage point. You're a French journalist, but you split time over here in Boston. So wanted to pick your brain on all things domestic on this end and international politics.
Okay.
Your take on the Trump administration so far?
Well, it's a bit early to be fair, maybe. So it's, but I mean, he certainly gives us enough food for mistreating him and not having a very good opinion so far. You know, and he brags a lot about how he's going to fix everything. He's been bragging a lot, hasn't done that much. So I don't know if I read in the New York Times yesterday or the day before a column by Charles Blow who said that Trump was a despicable, vile man and he was not going to change, you know, at 70 years old. So I don't know if that augurs well. But I saw him this afternoon in his press conference, you know, with the King of Jordan. And he promised to fix the world. So, you know, the messy world that he inherited, and he said he was going to fix it. So we're waiting.
Today, he said he was going to fix the world. Well, we find ourselves, obviously, this week, a horrific gas attack in Syria. What's the thoughts, you know, around the world of the Trump administration internationally? Clearly, the administration is young. But this week, obviously, a major international incident, a terrorism attack in Russia. I mean, there's a lot going on. What's the anticipation of how the United States will act moving forward?
Well, you know, I mean, Syria is not a very good example of how we should judge Donald Trump because, first, it's such a complicated issue. And second, you know, it was not Barack Obama's most shining moment, you know, when he tried to deal with Syria. Actually, I remember very well in August 2013, the jets, you know, including the French jets, were ready to take off and go and bomb Assad's, you know, a few zones in Syria after the previous chemical gas attack. And suddenly, on the Sunday night when this was supposed to happen, there was some initiative by Mr. Lavrov who said, oh, well, we're going to convince Assad to get rid of his chemical weapons. And then the British Parliament said, oh, we're not going anymore. And then Obama said, oh, well, we're not going anymore either. And the French felt a little bit left down, and when I hear that nobody in the world is ready or has ever been ready to do anything about Assad, that's not totally true. But it doesn't serve any purpose to you know, to talk about the past. It's, you know, the reality is now Assad has decided, probably after Mr. Tillerson's very careless declaration on how, you know, Assad should stay in power for a while, Assad has decided to test Donald Trump resolutions and world, you know, determination to act. I noticed in his press conference today, Donald Trump, you know, who didn't have enough harsh words on the chemical attack, didn't say a word on the Russian role in this whole crisis. When he was asked by a journalist what he was going to do about the Hezbollah, who are very active in Syria, like some kind of mechanical toy, you know, Donald Trump just went on the nuclear deal between Iran and a few other countries, you know, to say that it was the most terrible deal. I mean, that was not the question.
Yes,
and,
he's got the ability. He always skirts around things he doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah, but I hope it's a strategy for him to dodge the issues that he doesn't know much about or that he doesn't want to talk about. I am afraid that it's just a lack of knowledge on his part. And, you know, he confessed about the healthcare debate that, you know, it was a lot more complicated.
A lot more complicated.
And for a guy who's been telling us or the American electorate for many months now that he was, you know, he knew more about ISIS than the generals. And today again, you know, the world is messy, I'm going to fix it. That's strange. And We'll see, we should give him some time, and maybe he is going to do something major about Syria, which will surprise and delight us. But, we're still waiting.
We are still waiting. And what's your thoughts on the position of Russia right now, both on the international stage and relations with the U.S.? Obviously a hot topic, domestic political issue in terms of was or wasn't there coordination. But let's talk about Russia as an international player at this current time.
Well, it's Russia is, it's no longer the evil empire, I guess, because it's no longer an empire. Putin is a very smart leader. He has a big advantage over the leaders of most of the countries that we're familiar with, because, we live in democracies, and democracy is a lot more complicated to rule than the way Putin does. So I think, a starting principle in diplomatic action or in the geostrategic reflections or thoughts is to not trust Putin. It's kind of strange that Trump, who doesn't trust anybody, has always said nice things about Putin. And again, this afternoon, after the Syrian thing, where the Russians are the only ones in the world who say, well, it's not Assad, it's not us, it's not Iran, it's not anybody. It's the rebels, or it's an accident. I noticed that Trump didn't mention Putin's or Russia's names, one bit, which is very strange. Mm. And I guess that, a journalist kind of insisted on it, and he ran away, or he had other things to do than to worry about what he's going to do about Putin.
So I do want to ask about one additional international issue before we turn to tonight in the French elections. Brexit. Here we are in April 2017. What's the picture look like as the pieces are now kind of falling?
Well, it's...
And we just had David Cameron at Brown University the other week.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, well, bad guy, like Trump would say. Bad guy, real bad guy. He's responsible for, the Brexit. He should never have started this referendum piece about which, the campaign was full of lies by Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and all the people who entertained this idea, which is a very destructive idea, and now we are stuck with that problem, which is going to be very complicated to negotiate, and especially since right at the beginning the two parties don't even agree on what should be negotiated and which way they should go. Should we first agree on what the British owe the European Union before we decide how, what kind of relationships Britain will have with the European Union? Some estimates are that Britain has to pay 60 billion euros back to the EU, for the programs that it committed itself to. Between, the budget is like for 4 years, I think, so it goes until 2020. And so between now and 2020, the British committed themselves for the amount of 60 billion euros, okay? Do they pay that first, or is it part of the bargain they're going to try and negotiate before the actual divorce, which will be in 2 years? So it's going to be very complicated. It's a kind of, I don't want to use too big words, but it's a tragedy. Europe, the European Union, was a way for Europe to reconcile itself after World War II. Actually, Winston Churchill was the one who in 1946 decided that it would be great to have a European Union. And we just celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Rome Treaty, between the first 6 countries of Europe. And as a Spanish member of the European Parliament said the other day, when Theresa May brought her letter of divorce to to the European Council, he said, at the Parliament, he in a very emotional speech, he said, Europe is not a market, Europe is peace. It's because of Europe that France and Germany reconciled. It's thanks to Europe that Spain, Portugal, Greece were able to overcome the dictatorships. It's thanks to Europe in a big way that, Western Europe and Eastern Europe could reunite, that both Germany's reunited. And the Brits just come, Cameron, just for his own political purposes, he says, oh, let's have a referendum to see what happens. And the consequences are, in today's world, are not good. It's a symbol, it's a kind of a signal that you send to the world that nationalism is cool. Well, like, François Mitterrand said just before dying, he said, nationalism is war, okay? And this British administration is a nationalist administration. Nationalism is bad.
So let's tack then to the French presidential election. 11 candidates in the field?
Yeah.
I'm not going to put you on the spot to name them all, but talking about nationalism.
Well, I could.
Oh, absolutely, of course. But the ones we hear about, and one of the names we hear, again, is Marie Le Pen, of course, and we're talking about nationalism. Can you really compare a Le Pen and a Trump? I mean, sometimes the sort of, the couch quarterbacks, talk about...
Trump is worse. Okay. That's terrible to say, because, I don't know, but... Marine Le Pen is bad. I mean, she would be bad. It would be a disaster if she won, because it would be a disaster for France, it would be a disaster for Europe, and it would be a disaster because she is also a symbol of, she rejects foreigners, she doesn't like immigrants, she makes big spectacular declarations about problems which are not as big and as bad, I mean, there's some big problems, but, they're not as bad as she makes it sound. And she wants to get out of Europe, even though she's a little more careful now.
You say she wants to get out of Europe. Are we talking, so from the French standpoint, to follow suit?
Yeah, she wants to. But, she, at the beginning of the campaign, she said, the minute I'm elected, I'll bring the franc back, and get rid of the euro, which will make France bankrupt in about a week. And I'll get out of Europe too. Well, now she's saying, we'll be a step-by-step approach, and and then we'll start negotiations, and then there will be a referendum, and if the French people don't want to get out of Europe, then we'll do something else.
So is she backpedaling a little bit?
Oh yeah, but she didn't do well yesterday. They had the first debate between the 11 candidates, and she was not good. She was aggressive. She was arrogant. She was the kind of target of everybody else, and she did not react in a very smart way. So, but she has a very solid base of electors, and so I think and the electorate is very undecided, except for the people who are going to vote for her. So she probably will be in the second round, in the playoff. You know how we vote in France, there's first you have 11 candidates, and then the top two have a runoff 2 weeks after. So she probably will be one of the two, and the other one will be Emmanuel Macron, who's a new guy, he's a new guy. He was a cabinet minister of François Hollande for a while. He was a minister of the economy. He doesn't belong to any political party, and that's very new in France, that the two candidates who will qualify for the runoff don't come from traditional parties. I mean, the Front National never had any minister ever. Mm-hmm. They don't have any MP. I mean, they have 2 MPs out of 577. They've been in power in a few little towns, here and there in France, but they have no experience. And Macron is a guy who was never a member of any party. He decided to start his movement, as he called it, it's called En Marche, Onwards, and he's trying to unite, whoever is modern and pro-European. He's very pro-European.
So you think it's going to be those two? And this is what you're going to talk
about?
Well,
I'm always wrong in my predictions, my political predictions, but the polls at least, say that it's going to be Le Pen and Macron who will have between 24 and 25% each in the first round, and then the other ones, like François Fillon, who was prime minister of Nicolas Sarkozy for 5 years, and was a very strong candidate, but he was caught kind of, swindling public money.
That doesn't generally go over quite well.
No, no. And but there's Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is an old hand, very left. You know, it's a guy that Emmanuel Macron once said about his program. You know, it's Cuba without the sun. You know, that's what Mélenchon. But he's very entertaining. He's a very good debater.
I heard he had a great performance.
Very good performance
Yes.
yesterday, and but that would be a nightmare. I mean, if the second round was between Mélenchon and Le Pen, would be the end of Europe.
Well, we're going to keep a close eye on this. This is probably going to be the crux of your speech tonight at the Hope Club with the Providence Committee on Foreign Relations.
Well, I'll talk about Trump and Brexit too.
All things. Well, I appreciate you giving us a little preview and coming down to the studio down here. Hope to be there this evening to hear more of your talk. Jean Lesieur, very appreciate your coming into the studio today.
Thank you.
And we'll see the result of the French election and see if your predictions hold true, but appreciate getting the international look here in downtown Providence. So,
Okay.
Monsieur Lesieur, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll talk soon. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that was Jean Lesieur. He is going to be giving a speech this evening with the Providence Committee on Foreign Relations at the Hope Club. Glad to get him down here as France is in the thick of election season over there. Gave his thoughts on Donald Trump and some international vantage points as well. He splits time between France and Boston here. Great to get someone's an outside perspective on international relations. So appreciate Jean Lesieur coming.